Well, welcome our guest, Matt Weingast,
Right.
That's kind of cool. It rhymes. Our guest, Matt Weingast.
Right.
But I'm so pumped to see you on the Scars and Stripes podcast. We had one of your soldiers here,
Right.
Stephen Cunningham,
Right.
a few weeks ago, and he was an awesome conversation with his book that he came out with. And you were his executive officer.
That's correct.
And the 1st Cavalry Division.
The 7th, actually, it was the 4th Squadron, 7th Cavalry, which was part of 3rd Armored Division. But what you're thinking of is the 7th Cavalry Regiment. Most of the squadrons are in the 1st Cav Division.
Okay.
So if you do research on the Gary Owen, the 7th Cav, which is my Gary Owen lyrics, right?
Right.
That regiment is split up, and most of the squadrons are actually in the 1st Cav Division.
Okay.
But back in 1991, when we were doing this, they had just reflagged our Cav Squadron to the 4th Squadron, 7th Cavalry. So we were in the 3rd Armored Division. That was the division we were in. So that's the patch we wore.
Okay.
But you're correct. Like the 1st Cav Division is like in Vietnam.
Right.
That's when the 7th Cav was in Vietnam.
So that was like We Were Soldiers. If you've ever seen that with Mel Gibson, and he's first. So when I met Stephen, it's kind of funny just meeting you.
Right.
It's weird to me because I hadn't read his book yet. His book wasn't out yet.
Right.
So I read it and I was like, I really didn't even know who I was talking to.
Right.
In terms of like the enormity of what you guys went through,
Right.
and what you trained to be there, and how many people just couldn't make it for whatever reason. You can't really. It's funny because my son, he's now had been blessed to be playing at a Division I school, and what's interesting is that I'll see all his teammates, I'll see other teammates, and what's weird is you can tell they're athletes, but you can't tell who the starter is and who's not.
Right.
And so when you look at people and you judge them and you say, man, I don't. If I ever held on to that person's belt loop, I probably would fall down a lot. and what you guys had to go through, like Stephen, and I don't know if you were in his class, but when he was training for 1st Cav, he was put on the last march was to go. It ended up snowing or something really bad, and so that the guys were like, hey, you're gonna have to go on a 20-mile ruck. This is the last thing to graduate, and you had to do. And then they were like, "Hey, the conditions are so bad. Guess what, guys? You're in relief. We're gonna pick you up at the turnaround spot." Next morning, they get up and go, "We're kidding. You're gonna walk this back as well." And what he didn't know was it turned into be a 60-mile ruck, not a 40-mile ruck, for whatever reason. And so it was kind of like the carpet being pulled out from underneath your feet, But he also didn't know that there was DIs, drill instructors that were falling out. There were other soldiers that were falling out. But he was marching, and he was marching within that little 1-foot box of the next step and the next step. And so that's where you guys come from. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, because you guys went in the first Iraq War.
That's right.
And Desert Storm. And your job is, and correct me if I'm wrong, your job is the SEALs and those guys might go in plain clothes, but you're right after that to go find out. You got to blend it to a degree to say, well, here's a soft spot, here's a weak spot, or here's a strong point, don't go here. You're doing all this reconnaissance with little backup as a 1st Cav. And then you have to report back, hey, here, generals, here's where we think we can go. Here's where we think we can enter. Is that true?
Yeah, that's an accurate description. We are the eyes and ears. The cavalry is the eyes and ears for the Army at whatever formation you fall in at. So if you're in a scout platoon for a battalion, you're the eyes and ears for the battalion commander. If you're a scout in a squadron, then you're the eyes and ears for that squadron commander. And so a guy like Stephen, I mean, that's kind of what that's the beauty in all this. What you're getting at is you don't get any attention. You're not a SEAL, you're not a Ranger, you're not a special operator. You don't get that notoriety of what everybody in today's modern world, when they know like about SEALs, they know about what special operators do, but they just don't understand that somebody's doing it with less priority of resources and out front with less dedicated assets, and it's a very dangerous game. It's a very dangerous thing. And you got 19, I call him Sergeant Cunningham. So Stephen still doesn't ring right for me yet. So it's,
right.
Hey, Sergeant. But, and that's out of respect. I mean, the guy was leading men, and you got a guy like him, there's no there's no one that's going to come in and save him immediately, like in some of their instances, right? And he has soldiers who are mere mortals like we all are, but at the same time, not as well trained. They haven't been through Ranger school. They haven't been through special operator school. They went through basic training and then 19 Delta training. That's it, and that's a tough role. It's a tough world to be in for a guy to be a sergeant of guys at that level and be out there on your own. Yeah. And it was one of his soldiers was our first KIA that we suffered. So
yeah, I think they called him Sprout.
I did not know that. I actually didn't know that.
Which there's a reason for that, because he said, well, everybody calls a newbie a bean because they're just green and they don't know anything. But Sprout was different. He was very analytical. He was, I remember him talking about how, they were, you report on time. If you got to go get something and a mission's rolling out, you report on time. Reporting on time is 10 minutes early.
Right.
Right. And so Sprout had to run out because he had to go get fuel for the Bradley, I believe.
Yeah.
And so he's going to get and he's just almost missing, time. He's like, Steve was like, what in the world, where are you at? And he shows up with a minute to spare and he says, but sir, we didn't have any water. I'm like, and that was, the intangibles, if you will, of thinking more about just the fuel that you're thinking about something else. But, tell us a little bit about that. Like, what is it like to be in theater, in combat, to the best of your ability? I know some of these things are pretty difficult, but I don't think that, some of us think our latte is not hot enough, but there's times where there's a lot more different things going on in the world and things that we don't see, and I always kind of laugh about the whole, you don't want to know the truth kind of, scenario of, Jack Nicholson's famous, line. And that's the truth though.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to understand what you guys have to become. How do you do that? Like, what does that look like?
That's a great question. I think the best way I could answer it is you mentioned that your son, right, is an athlete and plays sports. It's kind of like the same advice you have to give the players, the young kids, when they're playing sports. You got to stay in the moment, right? And so all that bigger stuff just goes away. And it just becomes your job, and you're well trained. And then it becomes, I think, a closeness to the people you're with, right, to keep each other honest. And that's why the more elite the unit, and that's why I love the Cav, because it was a conventional forces, but that didn't speak to whether it was elite or not. Like some people believe, like I was just saying before, special forces and Rangers, they're the only elite troops. There's elite infantry troops. There's elite armor troops. There's elite, and those units, are noticeably better, than when you go into a different unit. There's a sense of cohesion, and you rely on that and you lean on that.
You know what's interesting? What you said though is like what I see a lot is like, because both my sons were thinking, military. And they both, well, one of them, it was Marines, no question about it. We're going Marine. I'm going Marine, right? The other one, he was looking at PJ, that kind of realm. They're both great athletes.
Right.
He's the one's Division I player. So, but we actually got to interview a PJ. He did. Oh, wow. And the PJ told him hey, listen, you don't have a life. Your life is this. And so, but what I found interesting is that a lot of times, unfortunately, we know the Marines probably that's the adage, hey, we're going to do the most with the least. But that's where people are gravitating. That's where a kid gravitates to is, I want to be a Marine, which is interesting because it's like, but that's the worst of the worst. Like, you're going to have the worst, I don't care. I want it. That's that American spirit that's interesting to think and see and experience, But you're right. I mean, I think in the last, say, decade with podcasts and I'm not saying anything. I'm on a podcast now. I run a podcast, but I feel like that there's these kind of celebrities in that world of tier 1 or SF kind of deal, and it starts to become kind of famous. But what we don't see is the folks that were behind a keyboard. They're just as important.
That's right.
It's different, but it's just as important. Also, the trauma they see is the same. Imagine these drones, operators. They're sending in Hellfire missiles or whatever missiles they're sending, and lives are being lost, right? Okay, it's a bad guy, but sometimes they hit the wrong thing too. That's a trauma. But tell us about sort of that first initial phase of the Iraq War, if you can go back to the Desert Storm.
Yeah. Trying to think back, it's a long time ago, but it was a very, like I said, we were in a really good unit, so you had that to lean on. But it's hard for people because of the outcome. The story's been told, the history's been written, kind of like some lines in my song, but you can't, you can't get back into those shoes. But at the time, we had no idea it would play out that way, right? And we knew.
What do you mean by that?
How many casualties there'd be, how many casualties there wouldn't be, or how easy it would be, how long it would take. We deployed without knowing how long we'd be back. There was no time frame on it.
What was the thought process of who your enemy was? How well fortified were they? How well trained were they? What was that message going into it?
Well, what we knew was that they had a lot more, resources than, a small army. They were the third or fourth largest army in the world at the time.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Don't hold me to those facts if someone wants to fact check me.
Top five is pretty impressive.
Yeah, it was pretty large. And they were equipped with, I wouldn't say the same new generation as the M1 tank, but certainly the M60 tank, the T7. They had T72 tanks. They might have had a few T80s at that point. I don't really remember that. I can't remember what tanks we saw that day. It's in the documents. It's written about in a few of the books that have been written about the battle that day. By the way, this is the same battle that you see a lot about with H.R. McMaster. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Right. And he was in the 2nd Cav Squadron, 2nd Cavalry Regiment, 2nd Squadron, which was immediately to our right. They got a lot of attention. One was because it was H.R. McMaster, and he became very famous.
But what do you mean to your right? They were flanked when you're coming in your operation?
Right. We were attacking online as a corps,
Okay.
And 4th Squadron 7th Cavalry was leading the 3rd Armored Division, and it was in the lead and on the right flank. In other words, on the right side of the forward moving boundary, and the 2nd ACR was to our right. It was actually our troop that was responsible, and because we were furthest, it was Alpha then Bravo, and Alpha was kind of in the lead. We were responsible for maintaining communications with the 2nd ACR.
Okay.
And so one of my radios was on the troop that was immediately to our right, which, again, I'd have to go back and check. I think it was my records, my notes, but I think it was a ghost troop.
So you're hearing their comms and your comms coming in. Okay.
But their troop level comms.
Okay.
So that when they hit contact. So we knew that they hit contact.
Okay.
And we hit contact at the same time. It was the same enemy belt. But they had tanks. We did not.
What were Bradleys?
Bradleys.
Okay.
Right. So that goes to what were we thinking? We were a divisional cavalry squadron that had just a year before transitioned to what they called, I think it was called J Series. Before that, we had M68 A3 tanks and M113 armored personnel carriers, and those were the vehicles that we used to do our reconnaissance missions, right?
Okay.
And that's it. We had 3 ground troops. They switched us to what they called a J Series, which they took away all our tanks, they took away all our M113's personnel carriers and our mortar tracks and all that other stuff, and they gave us M3A1, actually it wasn't even the A1s. I don't really remember. You'd have to ask somebody. But Bradley fighting vehicles, the scout versions of those, and 2 troops of those. And then they added 2 troops of air assets, air cav, which were Apaches. I'm sorry, Cobras, not Apaches. Cobras and Kiowa Scouts, OH-58s.
Yeah.
So we had 2x2. That's what they called it. But we had no tanks. And so our fear was always, if we run into something that we don't know what it is and they have tanks and we don't, we're really hurting. And especially if you do it in the middle of a sandstorm, that was one of the worst. And I've seen a few after my other tours. It was the worst sandstorm I was ever in. And it was a long one. It was a couple hours. And you couldn't see. You couldn't see 20 meters in front of your vehicle.
But that doesn't stop the mission.
No, it does not. And these guys are out there, literally the front of the front line. I mean, that's what people just can't appreciate. It doesn't matter. The Rangers go in, or the special operators go into a very defined, specific mission with high intelligence. Typically, Obviously, there's instances where you'd have a guy disagreeing with me on that, and we can argue about it, like no doubt. But the dedication of resources for those intelligence assets, as I've learned later in my career, right, in different levels, once I was in different levels of operations, you can't even compare it. These guys, we had no idea. We had a general idea of where this belt would be, but beyond that, nobody was sharing with us satellite photos. Okay.
That's interesting that even then, 1990, there was no satellite images.
No, in fact, that was a big part of my career development, was because I later found out the type of imagery and intelligence that was available. And it became very, it disturbed me. Like, how come?
Why didn't you give it to you?
Right. And then when
I remember Steven saying there was like one map and it was being passed around.
God, yeah.
I'm not dissing on the military. Don't get me wrong.
Of course not. It was a generation that was different. We didn't have cell phones. Like, people can't even relate.
Yeah.
We had one GPS that was, by the way, first generation GPS, and it wasn't very accurate. We had one for the entire squadron. The squadron commander held it in his
like
hand.
the Garmin or whatever it was.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we had these things called Lorans, and they gave one per troop or two per troop. So for every 200 guys, you had two.
Wow. And
they were like mostly navigations for boats, for seafaring. And, people did all sorts of, one of my friends, he was in a scout platoon, he was a Bradley, he mounted it on his Bradley, like he mounted it and plugged it. People did all sorts of weird things to them, but they were very subject to the metal, the type of metal in the armored vehicles would make them very inaccurate.
Oh, yeah.
So the readings would be off, right? You're really going to trust when you have to call in for fire and you're giving your own location? You're really going to trust that thing?
It might be on your location.
Right. And even the maps, like they gave us these maps, and it was they're blank map sheets with grid squares on them because there was no topography to map.
Mm-hmm.
It was crazy. So what we did...
Well, you're in the desert, so can't the desert topography change overnight depending on a windstorm?
That's true, too. And then you had these wadis that would form and unform. Right. So the crazy thing, what we did, and I don't know whose idea it was, I wouldn't know who to give credit to. I probably wasn't smart enough to come up with it. But somebody had the idea of, well, hell, we didn't have enough maps to go around. And again, a guy like Sergeant Cunningham, and he needs a freaking map. He's a scout, right? Well, we don't have enough maps, but we need the maps to be able to call in for fire, keep track of our movement. Who gets the maps, right?
Yeah.
We decided make a bunch of pieces of paper, draw grid squares on them, laminate them, right? Because we had plenty of acetate to make it laminated, and give every scout and every vehicle a laminated blank map that was to scale. And we would read out every morning on stand 2. Stand 2 is, 0500, sometimes, depending upon sunrise, all that other things. Everybody was awake, right? Everybody's up and ready, has already done their whatever personal hygiene, shave, whatever they need to do, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's in their battle position, whether it's their hole, their OP position, in their turret, whatever their position is, and you're ready to go, right? We would read out, at that point, everybody does orders call, and everybody would read out their situation, one by one. Each crew reports in, and in that, we then give out the orders for the day, right? When we give out the orders for the day, basically, and I'm kind of summarizing, we would give the left and right, the numbers that go in the left and right boxes, top and bottom.
On the grid.
Mm-hmm. So they would fill in their grid, and they would be able to then
they would mark on it with a laminate,
right, mm-hmm. with a marker, with a easy mark or whatever, sure. and that would help them keep track. So then when we'd read out those every morning, and whenever we change maps, we would report changing maps to whatever the new map number was. Because, of course, if you're depending upon where you're going, you then may need 2 or 3 other maps, right? But if you have this method, it doesn't matter. You're just constantly changing the numbers you're just redrawing the numbers, if you follow what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So most people had that. And then they would just write, because the hardest part was when you get scouts, the most important thing is the information they're reporting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're moving on the move in a sandstorm, shit flying all over the place, and a scout calls in that they have contact or they're reporting something, and you've got to read the map and you've got to take, take down the information and then report it higher and then figure out what it means, right? It's all that's not easy to do. And
now, how do you, in that situation, let's say that you're not engaging the enemy, but just like a football kickoff, you have to keep your line. You have to keep you have to keep your lane going.
Right.
But there's got to be a tendency you say, I got to pull off and go help my brothers.
Yeah.
Like
well,
that's got to be a major pull, right?
Yeah, that's that's exactly what happened that day, because of course, once the first shot is fired, all the plan, everything just goes to crap.
It's like Mike Tyson, when the first punch hits you in the head, the plan goes to...
Yeah. And as a squadron that day when we got punched in the nose, and we were essentially bleeding. We had a couple Bradleys from Alpha Troop that were hit. It gets rather complicated as to what really happened that day. That's another lesson learned that I took with me for the rest of my life. It's part about perspective. Like, you can't expect things to be, it's like one of my lines in my song, all that's left is haze and fog and the memory of being there, right? I mean, it's just like, that's all that's there, because your version of what happened is yours. And 5 different people have very different views of what happened. One of my experience during that battle that I can remember, and I have difficulty remembering things, but my biggest concern was less about the enemy that Alpha Troop and that was right in front of us, and more about what was happening, because what you said happened. We sucked in towards Alpha Troop, right? Second ACR hit their enemy in essentially the same line, and they sucked in towards their enemy. And McMaster does an attack on a tank, an armored battalion, or whatever sized element it was that was dug in. And he basically, the whole formation for them focused in on that. Well, we were essentially seeing different battalions from I think it was the Tawakana Republican Guard Division that really had taken, afterward the battle, we saw insignias and markings from all the different Republican Guards units. So obviously what the enemy had done was pulled volunteers for the ones who really wanted to fight and die for Allah, because it was a last stand. No one surrendered. I mean, that's the other crazy thing.
See, that's not what we heard.
No,
that's not what I heard.
Correct.
I remember
in that battle, no one surrendered. What I'm trying to, this is the part that
you were the tip of the spear.
We were the tip of the spear, and this is the part that a guy like Steve Cunningham and the NCOs and enlisted soldiers probably struggle with a lot, because people's remembrance of that war, what they think is fact. When I moved on to the armor school after I left, after I left my next Army educational experience, right? It's called advanced course for an officer, right? You have your basic course as a lieutenant, and then you have an advanced course. I was there with a friend of mine who was also in a scout unit. He was a scout platoon leader for an armored battalion at the time. And everybody there, their experience of the Gulf War, all the other fellow officers, this is a year after, not even a year after, this is 6 months later. Their experience was, we kicked ass, they surrendered, very few units suffered casualties, right? The 4th Squadron, 7th Cavalry, I don't remember the exact number, in the 20s, and we had 3 guys killed. Thankfully that wasn't the numbers that, the Vietnam War saw or other deployments saw or anything else. But for that war, it was a significant aberration compared to the rest of the units. And so, guys, it's hard to put that into context. People have this view that it was a big, safe thing, and so they automatically placed you in a box as to what your combat experience was. So for some of these guys, the sergeants and enlisted guys, they were a rare breed, to be honest, having gone through that and suffered through it. So suffered, or I don't like to use that word, but I don't know why that one came out. It's not suffered, succeeded through it, right? Mm-hmm. Struggled through it for sure. Yeah. So that happened that day. You lose some discipline, but it's less about discipline. It's more about the mission right in front of you, the enemy right in front of you. You're trying to survive. You're trying to save troops, and Alpha Troop was in a bad way, and we kind of pulled over. But we saw, to finish the story, there were reports of tanks that were moving out of their battle positions, their defensive positions, and moving in the direction that was essentially right towards the gap that had formed between
Yep.
The second ACR,
because people broke lines. They broke their
we each kind of went like that.
Yep.
And there was a gap in between. And these tanks were assembling and they were essentially counterattacking. And remember, we have no tanks. The only thing that you can really kill another tank with is another tank, really. I mean, or an anti-tank helicopter like the Cobra or the Apache. But I mean, we have tow missiles on our Bradleys, right? So we do have the capacity to destroy a tank. But it's for a scout, really, you don't want to do that because you have to sit still while you fire and fly that wire to the enemy tank. You literally have to fly the missile. I mean, you're keeping the reticle on the enemy tank, but you have to wait as it travels, and it's a wire-guided missile, so it's pretty slow.
So you're a sit and duck until that hits.
That's exactly right, and that's what happened to Alpha Troop that day. They were firing off. So when Alpha Troop hit the enemy lines, we were in a sandstorm. We were already in their kill zone. I mean, we were within 100 meters of their main defensive position. It was they couldn't see us, right? The enemy really couldn't see us. I think again
because of the sand.
Correct.
Yeah.
When I piece it together, and other people I've talked to, I think my personal opinion again is the vehicles that were firing the missiles the most to take out the tanks were also the ones that were exposing themselves and taking a lot of fire. And then we also had the problem of when our friendly troops finally joined the fight, because we had outrun earlier in that day around, we got orders, and it's written about like in a lot of the books about the Gulf War. Schwarzkopf put out this order. He was concerned that units were escaping out of Kuwait City and they were surviving and he didn't want them to have any military power capability left. So he wanted us to close that loop. And that's what we were doing. We were doing this hook. And he was afraid we weren't going fast enough because stuff was coming out. The highway of death, you've heard about that?
Sure.
That's all this, destroyed equipment as it was trying to flee Kuwait City, and the air units were just taking them out. But there was only so much they could get, right? So they wanted us to speed up and close that. So we were told to basically reduce our normal tactical procedures to the point where we joked about it. It was a forward moving screen as it was. We weren't really doing a zone reconnaissance because that takes a lot more time to do, and you're much more at a higher security.
And you were making a lot of noise too, so it's gonna be hard to be covert.
When we hit, the reason why we were that close to them was because we were going balls to the wall as fast as we could because we were being told to
close off this loop.
Right, and we're scouts. That's
not what you do. Interesting.
A movement to contact in a scout unit is like. You're not equipped. That's not what we do.
What would that be like? Infantry would be doing a move like that,
or an armor unit.
Yeah,
McMaster had the tanks to do it.
Right.
Even though he was a scout too, they were just differently equipped. So that's really what happened. And so they were telling us to move faster. So when we called for artillery that day, we had outrun our tube artillery. They could not support us with tube artillery
because you moved
too
fast.
They fired MLRS, but then they had to do it danger close because we were too close.
Yeah.
How many people talk about that? Nobody. So this is what happened that day, and I think a lot of people, guys like Steven, I'm really glad he's telling his story. This is, we had guys killed, and this is their story, this is their battle, and it's not I'm not trying to suggest that the other people have it wrong about what happened during the Gulf War. There's no doubt. We overwhelmed we were vastly superior then, and we overwhelmed an enemy force. But the lessons that we learned from that, I think also some of them were wrong, and that led to mistakes that were made 10 years later. There's no doubt.
So take us, if you can, like, how do you live that experience? What's going on? Like, you see We Were Soldiers, you see these battles that are depicted on movies. It's always different when you're there, right?
Oh, yeah. I can't speak to that. I mean, that was a completely different level of.
Well, sure, but
right,
you're
everything, and that's the other thing I learned from my 3 different tours. I operated at 3 different levels, from what I would call a very tactical, line level view, not as much so as someone like Sergeant Cunningham, because I was behind him for sure, like he was in front of me. And when you look at it in a pure, simplistic way like that, right? But at a tactical level, our mission was to find and destroy the enemy, and we were the reconnaissance for that. You can't get much more tactically oriented and hua, as far as I'm concerned. That's what I joined the Army to do. We all volunteered to be there in some way, for sure. And then other tours where I was at the operational level, and then the strategic level. I was, at the highest levels. And you understand that the nature of warfare is always so different. Each battle is different. That war was force on force, conventional forces, artillery, air assets. Now, it's true that the Iraqis weren't flying any enemy air assets that day, but they were previous to that day. Mm-hmm. So it's not as though it was like today's wars, where the counterinsurgency warfare is a very different game. And again, it doesn't mean one was better or worse, this or that. It's just very different. So I think that's what I think is hard for a lot of people who are not military minded to appreciate. Every veteran's story is going to be different, and everybody's perspective is going to be different. I think one of the things it taught me was that somebody's always had it worse. Somebody's, always suffered more, endured more, went through worse conditions than what you went through. That and most combat soldiers, I think, can relate to that. And then the second piece of it is, but there for the grace of God go I, right? I mean, anybody could fail. Anybody could, be overwhelmed. Like, those things are real. And then, of course, if something's 1 meter to the left, or 1 foot to the left, or 1 inch to the left, those things just go away. Like, there's no way to explain it.
Did you have any experience? Because now I kind of want to fast forward, because you were in that war. You stayed in the military and eventually got to 9/11.
Right.
And so, but just before we move from the Gulf War or the Desert Storm war, was there any time where you just, in that experience, something happened and you're like, I don't know why that happened. I don't know why we didn't get killed there. I don't know why we survived that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a few that come to mind. Yeah, I don't even know where to begin on that one. I think it's all. It goes back to what you said. Like, I don't even think I'm comfortable talking about those, because it's like, it's hard to emotionally piece them together. Like, you just can't even. But there, that day was, the first time I was in combat. And I wasn't in as much combat as, guys right to my left or right to my left, or right. Even in some instances, it was a crazy situation. It was a sandstorm. Nobody knew really what was going on as it was happening. It was really pieced together afterwards. Everybody was in their own little lane. That's why, again, my music, that's one of my songs talks about that. And the burden of command, of leadership, whether it's at the squad level all the way up, that's what dominates you. And I don't really have a lot of really good memories of those instances that I would start talking about, is what I'm trying to say.
Were you in charge of a company, or?
I was the XO of a cavalry troop in that engagement, right?
So that would be like platoon type size?
It would be three platoons plus other assets.
Oh, you were almost a company then.
We were a troop. A troop is a company.
Okay. So that's at least what, 100 plus?
150. So yeah, I think every day we'd have the numbers, and it was. I think our number, for some reason, 156 is a number in my head that I kind of remember, that most of the days when we were full strength, that's what we were at.
But one decision that you make could cost untold lives.
Right. One failure to, do something, one mistake. I mean, that goes back to your first question. I think, it's just so hard to, what the mindset was. You understood the realities, but, it's that warrior mentality. It doesn't matter, whether you're a Marine. It doesn't matter whether you're Army, what level you're operating at. That you have to put that out of your mind. You don't think about it. You don't think about the whys. You don't think about the why am I doing this? Why am I here? It's 100%. We're going to focus on what we got to get done today and what we need to do to survive tomorrow, right? Mm-hmm. The same mindset has to be applied. But at the same time, you're going to joke about it. Mm-hmm. Everything's, snafu was the World War II thing. It's the same, I think, wherever you are. You have to make light of it, have a sense of humor. I think that's why I'm always getting in trouble with my wife because I'll say stuff that is, like she just doesn't get she still, after 37 years, she still doesn't get my sense of humor, that I'm just being stupid. I'm saying something stupid that I don't mean it. It's just to break the ice, to laugh a little. Everything's got a little too tight.
What's interesting what you just said is the word why,
Right.
And I had a guest on a couple of podcasts ago, and she lost her husband at 22 years old. She was 29 weeks pregnant. He just routine, having fun at the lake. He jumps off of a cliff that everybody was jumping off of with a life vest, and the life vest breaks his neck, snaps his neck. And so there was a doctor, nurse. Anyway, they basically had everybody there that could save her husband's life, and she watched his spirit leave his body. So for 6 months, she's tormented by this, and she's tormented, and she's a believer, a strong believer. And so finally she said, God, I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this anymore, but I'm going to put everything I can into you. I'm going to give everything to you, like good, bad, whatever. I'm giving it all to you because I can't take it anymore. And what she heard was the word he says, then stop asking why.
Mm.
And that just hit me right there, because if you're going into battle, you have to have faith.
Yeah.
In everybody around you, the plan, everything. Because as soon as you start asking the question why, you start doubting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what she learned, was that, okay, God, whatever happens, I'm not going to ask why, because I know you have a plan that's greater than mine. And just like in your situation, you have a battle plan that's greater than yours. Somebody else has looked over the plan before you. And so if you start doubting, everything falls apart. You start making bad decisions.
Yeah.
So I just, that was interesting when you said that.
Yeah, and think about that. Like you know Sergeant Cunningham's story. So
yes,
like
100%.
So let me just preface this with I think what makes, if we're all unique, we're all different, everybody has their own perspective, but what makes my perspective frustratingly unique at times is that I've operated, whether it's corporate levels, my later experiences with corporations in leadership environments where you're dealing with Harvard, Ivy League, background people, Wall Street people, considered to be, CEOs, CFOs of multi-billion-dollar corporations, considered to be the elite of the elite, right? You would say
Top of the echelon.
Right. General officers, considered to be the elite of the elite. I've met a few presidents. I've met a few senators. Elite of the elites, right? I have to say that at this point in my life, looking back, the best people I ever served with, I ever met, I should say, are for the most part, the people I think of are these people who dealt with these circumstances, because nobody appreciates how hard they tried to do the right thing. When their life was on the line. We live in an environment where people will so easily question somebody else's perspective and what they did when they've never even been in a situation where their life was actually on the line and there's rights and wrongs that that are guiding them. Right? They've never done that. So take a guy like Sergeant Cunningham and his small squad, right, of scouts. On February 2nd or February 1st, depending upon which time zone you're in, he loses a soldier, the youngest soldier in our troop. And why? To your point, why? It's a crazy story. Like, I'll let him tell the story because, my involvement with that story was from a distance. I'm hearing the reports. We're trying to get help. Guys obviously dying, right? And we can't see, we can't hear. We didn't have drones. We didn't have that stuff. We couldn't even get an air helicopter in, a medevac out, because the whole purpose of where we were was supposed to be highly classified so that the enemy didn't know that we were doing this left hook or right hook. And think about that squad having to move on. And 18 days later, now we're going, or 20, whatever it was, we're going across the berm, going into combat. And again, nobody knew. Somebody accidentally leaked or intentionally shared the casualty rates expectations for our squadron, because logistically they were trying to send us enough, all the stuff that we would need, medical supplies and things like that, to account for that, and it was staggering. And that spread like wildfire in that unit, right around the same time that we lost Private Walker. And, here's a kid and you said he, Squirt. They would call him Squirt. Right? Was that
Sprout.
Sprout.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Like I didn't.
Because he was better than a bean.
Right.
Like he was more advanced than just a bean.
Right. But to me, honestly, like I knew who Private Walker was. I'd seen him out on the line. I knew him, but knew him by Private Walker. I probably never. If I had a conversation with him, it was probably very brief. And that's the challenge. You go through this alone. Right. And for a guy like Sergeant Cunningham, he has to maintain that distance too, just like I had to maintain that distance. But at the same time, enormous respect. He loved the kid. Mm-hmm. Right. And you get a love for the people around you. That burden. And so the why, like, why did this happen? Right before I'm about to go into a situation where it was expected to be a lot worse, Yeah, that's a part of leadership and perspective and ability to deal with things that I don't think people can relate to outside of the first responder and military world, that police law enforcement world. It's a level of responsibility that you have for other people that is a burden, and it sits with you and it causes you to be, one of my songs is about being alone, and you experience this alone because you can't share. You're not free to lay your burdens down, is one of the lines in my song. That's something that I don't think people really, can appreciate. And then you have to make this transition into the rest of the world when you come home. And it's just a very difficult thing.
It's interesting because I know we're going to get to this, but just kind of the faith part of
Sure.
everybody's walk, and
Mm-hmm.
what's great about the military is there's all kinds of stuff in the military, but we come together as one, right? But what you were saying about not knowing what you're going to do in a certain particular situation, and a lot of times it's how you're trained. And so people that say, "Oh, I would have done something different," you have no idea.
Right.
So my nephew was an Oklahoma City police officer, and at one point, this is when body cams were coming out, and they were being so someone he had ascertained somebody, gotten a fight with them, bruised him up a little bit, and they wanted to report him. And so he basically said his officer or executive officer, I'm not sure exactly what you call them, but his captain brought him in, hey, I need to talk to you about this because there's a complaint against you.
Right.
And so he explains it, and he goes, I'm going to tell you the end of the story before the beginning because I don't want you to be anxious about this. You did everything right.
Right.
But what he said, my nephew said, I don't remember every step of the fight. And he said, you did everything perfectly to the book because of the training that you've gone through.
Right.
It's instinctual, right? And so they had the person come in after he did the interview. And as the guy walks in, he says, yep, here's my report, da-da-da-da. And he goes, before you start your statement, we want to let you know that everything was caught on body cam.
Right.
They got up and left.
Right.
Because they knew they were wrong.
Right.
And so I liken that to now my walk, with Jesus is that the commandments have been imprinted on my heart.
Right. And
daily I get up and I renew that. And so what I pray happens to me, and I think not to this level, but when I get accosted or agitated by somebody, that when you squeeze me, that you see the love of Jesus come out.
Mm. Yeah.
So hopefully what I'm being trained or training myself over and over and over each day that I wake up, that even though my wife says something that I don't like, that I don't respond in anger.
Right.
But it's still hard.
Oh, man. Yeah,
or your kid
Yeah.
or a coworker or
yeah.
whatever. It's like, it's hard to the two main commandments, love me with all your heart and all your soul. And then secondarily, love your neighbor.
Yeah.
But how do you do that, Matt, when that neighbor
Right.
raped somebody that you love,
Right.
killed somebody that you love? You wash their feet?
Right.
What?
Yeah.
You only wash that feet? That's what Jesus did, according to the scripture.
I think it's a very hard thing. And I will say that, the only thing I find it easier to communicate through songs.
Well,
about a lot of this stuff.
Let's jump into that because we keep talking about it.
No, it's okay. But, I was going to make, it's all bonus time, right? That's all of us on life, this earth, That's really all we have. But the biggest burden you have in life is coming to dealing with the fact that you're not going to be good or perfect or even right, even though you're grateful and appreciative for that bonus time. And I think if I had to sum it up, I think that's the source of the, at least, again, I can't speak for anybody else, but I think a lot of my problems, I boxed up all my anxiety and stress, and I boxed it up. I took what I needed to do to learn and become better all those years while I was in the military to apply to being better and all that. But I never dealt with it. I never dealt with any of the decisions that I made or things that I did or failures that I had or this or that. You just kind of learn from it to get better, but you don't really deal with the emotional parts of it until all of a sudden you're at a point in life where you start looking at it. And then you realize, gee, I've been beating myself up because I promised that if I survived this moment, and then I learned that I kept saying that promise at different times in my life, I'm going to be a better man. I'm going to be a better dad. I'm going to be a better husband. I'm going to be a better friend, a better this, a better that. And I remember coming home, you're on that high, and each of the tours, it's the same story. And then you realize I did this 3 times, and each time, did I really get better? Did I really change the way I live my life? I mean, it was a very hard thing to do, and you start beating the shit out of yourself, right? Because you're failing, right? You're not. So what I've learned from that guy who you brought up who raped or killed somebody, a neighbor, I think there's so many people on this planet, they had a bad day, and now it controls their whole life. And so that's the scariest part. I've had enough interactions. Again, probably not something I'm really prepared to even speak about in deep detail, but with people close to me, friends, family, who for mental health of that, right? One bad day. And so I think a lot of veterans, I think the 22 a day, I'm no expert in this stuff, I'm not, but just speaking from me, I think you were about to ask me about my songwriting journey. It all came out because I was boxing this stuff up. And I was working in the civilian world, in a corporate America. And I had put all that was my way of escaping it all for years. I just was going to be successful at whatever it is I was doing. I went to law school. I became a lawyer. Now I'm in the corporate world, and I'm doing that. And it was just about being successful, being good at what I do.
It was the next rung on the ladder.
Correct. Right. You focus on that.
It's intoxicating, isn't it?
Right. And years later, I left my company that I was with for the last 8 years of my career that I was in the corporate America just last year. So to me, all of a sudden I had this time, and I had some other stuff going on in my life that was forcing me to really focus on, what have I done? I have never dealt with all this stuff, and now my mind's all messed up. I have free time, and I'm thinking about stuff that I hadn't thought about, for years. And it's just, so for me, my mom passed away 3 years ago. Maybe, I forget what year it was, but 3
Were you
or 4
guys
years
pretty
ago.
close? That's a silly
Not really.
question.
No. So one of my songs, it was complicated. We were close, but we weren't. She was my mother. I loved her, but we would fight.
Even past 18? I mean,
we just never saw eye to eye.
Okay.
I don't, I'm not sure. There were definitely I wasn't bad. It wasn't it wasn't I think my siblings had similar issues with my mom, right? She had a tough life, early on in her life, until she met my dad. And we don't want to get into that really right now, but my point is she was very sick. She had Parkinson's, and she called me to say goodbye, right? Basically was the conversation. And she brought up that she thought I should go back to my writing. Well, she found a box in her garage or her house that I grew up in. And years earlier, she had called me up. This is why I was living in New Jersey. My kids were playing ball. I had stuff going on. She's like, you got to come clean out the house because, I'm going to throw this stuff away. And that's the way we were. I was like, I don't have time to, we lived 2.5 hours away. I'm like, I don't have, Ma, just throw it out. You know what's in this box? Yes, I know what's in the box. Throw it away. I don't need it, right? turned into a fight. She threw away the box. Now you should go back to writing. So I was in the moment, saying goodbye to my mom. I really didn't think much about that. And then when all of a sudden 2 years later or so, and I had more time, and I'm like, gee, I never even really grieved about my mom. I was so busy getting back to work. And so what can she teach me to be better? Because she was always trying to. I was failing, that sort of thing. And so I sat down and start writing poems again. And then, well, gee, I always thought these poems would be music, and maybe that's a way to, put all of this to rest in my head, because it's just, there's so much different stuff that have gone on over the years that I just never processed.
Bro, you're giving me chills right now because you know the book of Psalms, right?
Not as well as I should have.
That's
probably.
okay. I'll tell you about what it is. All right. It's King David.
Oh, yeah.
And King David, basically one of the greatest warriors of all time.
Right.
Right. He wrote a bunch of poems.
Oh, wow. I didn't even, I was probably taught this, but. Yeah.
And so in Psalms is literally him singing those poems. Man,
yeah. Well, that's kind of, I guess that's not a new story. And what I learned is there's a lot of guys like, guys and gals like me doing the same thing right now. So I think it's that stage of life that you reach. So I started writing these songs and I can't perform. So just anybody out there who is listening, I'm not a performer. You won't ever see, nobody wants to
You know what Moses said, right?
What did he say?
He said, God, why do you want me to talk to the people? I can't even speak. I can't. He said, gosh dang it, I'll give you your cousin Aaron, or I think his cousin. He'll speak for you.
But that's great.
But God was working through Moses in a big way, obviously.
Well, I believe that for sure. And yeah, so nobody wants to pay to believe me, let alone they won't even sit in the same room with me.
Well, what did I listen to? I would listen to.
I was kicked out of chorus in like 6th grade. One of my friends, I'm still friends with him to this
Thank
day.
God for auto-tune. Is that what it is?
Well, it's not me. I'm working with vocalists and musicians.
Well, hang on. I think like the audience is going, what are you guys talking about here?
Right.
So let's talk about your music a little bit, because the music unpacks some boxes for you mentally.
Big time. Right.
And now, were you putting these poems together while you were in the Iraq-Afghan war?
So I was writing poems.
And by the way, did you get all the way to like war college and you were at that level? Did you graduate war college and you were at a higher level going into Iraq, Afghanistan?
So I was my career in the Army, I capped out at a lieutenant colonel.
Okay.
I was on a path to make full colonel, and it's kind of a long story, but
which is the pre-colonel. You got to go to war school to become a colonel.
Correct.
Okay.
And I had just come home. I did a couple deployments, and I was in the reserves.
Okay.
And I was working, and I was trying to get back into the good graces of my corporation that put up with the fact that I'd just been gone for a couple years.
Right.
Right. So it was a conscious decision to me that I couldn't go to the full-time war college.
Okay.
And it was at that point in my life, I was very frustrated with the Army, especially the Army Reserve, because it would become two different militaries. We were still involved. This was 2011 timeframe. So we were still engaged. The unit I was commanding was providing support to units deployed overseas from the Washington, D.C. area. And it was a very frustrating environment because you had a whole community of people who didn't deploy, and many of them never deployed. And this was their full-time gig, or it was their reserve gig. And, then you had these soldiers like a Sergeant Cunningham. And
that knew combat.
Right. And one of my soldiers had come home. He had just done a tour in Iraq, and they were telling me to send him back over. They were basically telling me to give an alert order to a soldier to deploy. And by this point in the war, that happened to me in 2001. I mean, we deployed on zero notice. I mean, and again in 2003 it happened. So I understand it, but this was 2011. There were all sorts of executive,
a lot of changes had happened.
Yeah, and a lot of commanders that against policy.
Just the way they were training.
You had to give a soldier a certain amount of time.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And they were essentially telling me to violate that. And I was like, and the general on the call who was telling me, and I this is me. I didn't mean it as an insult to him, because I didn't. I really meant it as, do you understand what you're doing? I'm like, have you ever deployed? And of course, he took it as an insult that I was insulting him, which fairly enough, I should have chose better words. And I didn't approach it the right way to be successful in what I was trying to do, which was to get him to understand. And it went the other way. And all of a sudden, the next day I'm having a conversation with my 06 commander and about putting in my paperwork to resign because, I just was frustrated and angry and couldn't believe that was the outcome of the call, was we were still going to send this guy overseas. And it just didn't make any sense to me, but that's that. But yeah, so I didn't go to war college, but I went to law school on my own after I left, I was still in active duty. So my career path was very strange because I made a conscious, the Army had this program called branch detail program, right? So for officers, they would take officers and send them to combat units, to combat arms units, because it's the triangles, right? Combat arms units need a lot of lieutenants, but not that many generals. And then other branches are the other way around.
Okay.
Military intelligence is one of those
branches. So some top up, some bottom up.
Correct. Okay. And so military intelligence is one of those branches the other way around, right? You need a lot of
data finders, if you will.
You need a lot of senior people, but not a lot of junior people.
Okay.
Officers, when it comes to officers. So what I found out right before we were deploying to the desert, actually for the Gulf War, somebody was telling me, hey, you're a branch detail. I'm like, what? Means you're coming up MI on your ORB. I mean, your officer record brief. MI controls your assignment, your next assignment, not armor, not cavalry. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And I didn't even know. Like I looking now, I knew after the fact, but I do recall, like in ROTC, where they were teaching us how to fill out our accessions packet, which is the package that you fill out to say, what branch do I want to go, right? And what do you want to do? And all I wanted to do was be a scout or be a recon guy. But I wrestled in college and I tore my ACL. So I knew it was going to be a struggle to even get the Army to let me be commissioned.
Oh, yeah.
Let alone go to Ranger School or anything like that. So I wasn't sure. So you have to put down a certain number of branches. I picked armor for cavalry first, right? Somewhere up on my list was MI, right? And then apparently the application, because I went back and looked after I'm like, the application had a place where you check this box. And I kind of vaguely.
This is tracking back to high school?
This is in college.
Okay, ROTC college.
Yeah, and so you check the box. And I have a vague recollection of being in an ROTC room when the people were telling us how to fill out the package, and they told us about this branch detail thing. And what they told us was, check this box if you want an active duty commission as opposed to a reserve commission, because you're most likely, at that time, a lot of officers that are going through ROTC would go into the reserves. And I wanted to go active duty.
Okay.
That's what I want. This is what I wanted to do.
Right after college, you want to go active duty.
This is what all I want to do is be a recon guy, to do something, that. Originally, I really thought I wanted to fly. But again, my ACL being gone, I didn't know that I would be able to get a flight physical, get approved for a flight physical. So I was focused on that. And I checked the box because I wanted to be active duty, because back then it increased your chances of getting, and that's why I checked the box. But I'd forgotten all about it. I didn't even think about it. I was armored. No one ever told me that I was branch detail. I think this happened to a lot of guys, by the way. A friend of mine it happened to, and he was told he's going to go to, I forget which branch. He's like, screw that, I'm going to SF. And so two of my buddies, with three of us, were going to go into SF. I had just gotten married. My wife was not very keen on that idea.
Bet not.
No, she was not very keen on that idea. So especially after coming back from our first combat tour, which we thought would be the only one ever, right?
You were already telling jokes she didn't get.
Correct.
My goodness, what did it be after that?
That's exactly right. So what happened was, that's where my career took a strange turn. So I was told, you're MI branch. My commander tried to fight it. The colonel tried to fight it. I remember I have the letter still that my squadron commander shared with me, that some senior general in the Pentagon, Bob, the reasons you're saying this guy needs to stay in the cavalry are the same reasons why he must go to Intel. Period. So I went to Intel, and they turned me. I don't know. I was a fish out of water. I was. What'd you call me earlier? You called me A fish, oddball, one of the guys in my career path. It is. And so
Unorthodox.
Yeah, for sure. And so once I turned into MI branch, I was a fish out of water. I didn't fit in. And at that point, they offered me this opportunity to go what was called to be an end-to-end reconnaissance, strategic intelligence. So I'd be, and they were like, there's another guy I went through, the captain at the time. And they sent us to this course that was a CIA-run program, CIA-run course that was to teach us how to become a strategic recon guy, or I forget what the title was. And they gave us a special identifier on our ORB. And that changed my career forever, because that maybe turned me into a different type of MI officer, right? And then I got out of the Army. I kind of I wasn't happy. I was doing stuff with the agencies, and people next to me were wearing suits and ties, and I'm wearing a uniform, and I'm like, I could be doing this as a civilian. And my wife was, we were starting to have kids, and it was like, what are you going to do about the Army? What do you think? And my time in DC was coming to an end, or about to, and I wasn't ready for the civilian world. So I enrolled in law school at night. And
you went to law school at night?
Yeah. I was still in the Army.
So you get your law degree.
I get my law degree. Yeah, I get my law degree. Took
We're
4
coming
years.
back to the music, but I want to hear a little bit more. Then we're going to come back to the music.
Yeah. So I at the time, I thought, gee, this is a path that I can chart. I can be an expert. Some of the stuff I was working on in the Army, I'm sorry, in the agencies that I was working for, you had to understand a little bit about national security law, intelligence law. So I would walk down the hall to the general counsel office for the Department of Defense or for the agency, and I would ask them questions because, hey, we're doing this, and then I would walk down hall to the more senior technical operators, because I was new to that world, right? I'd come from the frickin' desert,
frontline desert.
Right.
Yeah, you were.
I was a fish out of water,
gun in hand.
And I would talk to them, and they would say, "Well, this is how it works," and I'm like,
not exactly.
These two things don't seem like they're aligned very well. And the Army sent me to a master's degree in strategic intelligence and national security policy. So they sent me for that degree for 1 year.
That's not the law degree. That's
before the law degree.
Okay.
That was for 1 year. That was my first year in Washington, D.C. That was part of that program.
So that's military strategic planning, basically, is what it is.
Yeah. Like in a way, national security policy and how and one of the classes that I had to take was called intelligence law.
Is that what piqued your interest?
Yes. And that's where, I'm learning this, but then I went into that field. I learned this stuff at this course I was at. Now I'm in the field in the Washington, D.C. area, working for DIA, CIA, different agencies, right? And in a military uniform, or in a military assignment. Sometimes I'd be in civilian clothes, but it was only because uniform didn't matter, is what I'm saying. And we were doing strategic level intel stuff, highest level stuff, And it didn't make sense. Like I was like, oh, there's some issues. I really want to better understand this. So for me, I said, well, let me go to law school, learn about the law, and be somebody who can operate in this world, who could speak to both sides. Because I'm definitely an operator. I'm
You've been boots on the ground.
Yeah, I've been an operator. And so that opened a whole different world for me. And on one hand, I loved it. And on one hand, it was just like very political. It was very difficult it was not my nature.
Are you completely removed from that now?
Yes.
So you can speak about different things.
Yeah.
So what do you think happened? And did you, maybe I'm wrong, because there's a lot of disinformation out there, but there was a switch within the CIA somewhere around the latter part, maybe the last 10 years of the Afghan war, where they allowed CIA to become less about intel, and more militaristic opportunities, where they actually carried weapons. They were able to go into battle. There's, for lack of a better way to explain this, if you've ever seen the movie Sicario, where they were, they were going across for cartels and trying to get information, stuff like that. Did that really happen? Like, was there really a shift in, we're going to give the CIA more almost like SF type ability? I hate to even say this, but interrogation type things that they can do. Did that happen, or is that a complete misinformation?
I can't speak personally with personal knowledge about that time period, because by 2010, I was back in the reserves. By 2008, 7, 8, I was back in the reserves in that world, and I wasn't on boots on the ground anymore, and I couldn't tell you. So I could tell you very well what I thought the operation environment looked like, coordination between CIA, the CIA's role, our role in Afghanistan in 2003, 2004, which was the last time I was in theater. But I would say at that point in time, that wasn't the biggest. They were always, the CIA was operated under a different set of rules. I mean, the biggest problem I had was the fact that we worked so closely with them, but we had different requirements. And I had to get my guys to understand, hey, when we're dealing with...
Like when you say that, rules of engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Rules of engagement, rules of how do you handle a prisoner, a person you capture, somebody who was captured on the battlefield. They have to operate by different set of rules. We have to operate under UCMJ rules, right? And getting my guys to appreciate that, right? And again, as I mentioned before, I wasn't a special operator, but we were operating in a special operations environment. I was part of we were essentially assigned to a special operations task force. So that was one of the more difficult things, was to try and get people to appreciate that, they do their thing, we do our thing,
and keep them separate
to some degree.
But the reason I asked that question is because of your more of a formal training through this course, you got to see both sides.
Well, it's crazy. That's correct. And then I found myself,
maybe you didn't act it out, or you weren't part of that CIA, but you knew the other side.
That was one of the most difficult things. And again, when you asked me before, like, there's trauma from, not trauma, that's not the right word either, but there's stress, there's issues over stuff that happened that were violent actions and incidents, firefights or whatever, that sort of thing. There's that. And then there's the burden of command, the burden of leadership, the burden of decision making in these environments, which is not, I was always so focused on dealing with certain more of the obvious stuff. And that stuff is just, it comes back after you finally look back and you say, wow, what the places I was and the things that I did and the things that I took part in and what my role in all that was. And I really, it's not about what I did. It's more about what I didn't do. Or not about, and I say it's more about what could I have done more? There was such shit going on when you look back on it and you're like, was I an agent of change enough?
It's like the Monday morning roundtable after the Sunday game.
Right. And we didn't really, that's one of the lessons learned I think I have with business too. Like in the corporate world, people talk about improving and getting better, but so many of the corporate teams, there were good and bad, right? Corporate teams that I would be on from a leadership perspective, I think that's a thing that a lot of combat experienced veterans have. When you're in that corporate environment and you realize that your leader really doesn't care about getting better as a team, right? Does that executive leader really understand that we need to talk about this in a very different way, in a much more honest and direct way, to be able to improve and get better, but they're afraid of having those conversations, right? Whereas I think a lot of military guys are very comfortable having those conversations in very direct ways and being able to still shake hands and work together side by side. I mean, that's the difference at the end of the day. And so it's really hard for you to succeed at those levels.
I know you wrote about that you had to, you were dumbfounded. You had to start separating what it was like when you had men's and women's lives in your hand.
Right.
And we're gonna check our egos at the door and we're gonna get what's right. But in the corporate world, it was like, if you guys were talking about someone's life here,
right,
and not a widget we're selling, and maybe we fell on this widget, But you took it to a viewpoint of, if we fell on this widget, it might kill the company.
Right.
And that was hard.
Right. But it was much, and then again, my way of dealing with risk has always been different with a lot of other lawyers since becoming a lawyer, right? That's something that defines who I am. I mean, we had risk going out the front gate, out the yin yang, but we still had to go out the front gate. Yeah. And you're not going to mitigate all the risks. There's all risks that you won't think of. You can't be perfect. You can't expect yourself to be perfect, right? Those are all things I think most combat veterans figured out really quick, because you had to put that stuff away because you got to do it the next day. Mm-hmm. So, for me, that's, I think, what's distinguished myself in a way that it's hard to relate to people.
Well,
it's fellow civilians talking about politics, fellow, corporate members talking about problems in the company. It's hard. I think that becomes really hard. We're aliens. We're outfitters. We don't really, And then when somebody doesn't appreciate that perspective right away, that becomes apparent. Like, you're okay. Well, this person doesn't really appreciate what I bring to the table beyond just being a lawyer, right? So
were you able to adapt though? Like, I mean, because I'm just talking to you. Yeah. I feel like you could be a civilian. You could be like, if I didn't know your background, we could be just chopping up about business or whatever, and I wouldn't even know about your military background.
That's how I got by. I learned very quickly. There were people around me who knew. Most people who I worked with probably thought I was a JAG guy, right?
Really?
Yeah, they thought I was a JAG guy in the Army. They thought I, got out of the Army and went to go work in corporate America as a lawyer in a company, because they hire a lot of JAG people. That's probably what most people thought. You didn't talk about it, very much. Obviously, my close friends, I did, but I've never been someone who's not willing to talk about this stuff. I love talking about it, but what I've learned is that most people don't want to hear it, right? And most people can't relate to it. And when it comes to the lessons learned about life and the perspectives that you've learned, you start talking about that and you become way too preachy. It's for that environment, and come on, Matt, we got to figure out how to, protect this revenue. Okay, let's focus on that. So I learned real quick, that's really what you had to focus on.
But your experience has moved you into writing now. You do a lot of writing for business.
Yeah. So as I started saying before, for business, I'm now doing consulting work. So I do fractional GC work with entrepreneurs to help solve whatever problems that they have with their idea, their innovation. I'm working with a company right now called, I'll give a plug out to one of my clients, but Weather Gear Truck Duffel. It's a really cool product. I love it. The best accessory.
What's the website? Weather Gear?
Well, we're selling that one through truckduffel.com.
Okay, truckduffel.com.
Truckduffel.com. Yeah, it's a great product if you have a pickup truck. I can't believe that it's a simple thing, but it's so it's unbelievable how useful it is. And we're getting that feedback. We just put it out, so it's pretty new. But anyway, so that's fun, and that's what I'm doing. I'm helping. He's a fellow veteran. I found when I left my company, I have found that what's most important to me for the rest of whatever time I have left on this earth is I got to get back to doing stuff that I enjoy, that finds purpose, that's connecting with people in whatever ways, whether it's this team of people that I really enjoy working with. I'll make less money to work with that team of people. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's more important to me than anything. So the music, so that became something that, as I said, my mother made me, didn't make me make a promise. She asked me to do this. And then I had this time on my hands.
Now, before you start, you said something. You said there's a box for you to get.
Yeah.
And I thought you were going to go down the line saying there was poems you wrote as a kid.
Yes.
Did she send those to you?
Yeah. So back to your question.
So she didn't throw them away?
No, she threw them away. I had different boxes. I was writing poems. Like there's probably some, I won't say the age, some very, very nice women who were very attractive young girls in high school and college who may know the fact that I wrote poems, okay, out there.
They might have some #1 hits.
Right.
In the yearbook.
The funny thing is, there were very few soldiers who I served with next to who knew that when I was sitting there with my flashlight, I wasn't writing a letter home to my mom, right? that's the irony, right? And very few people. Like I think my commander, we just had dinner with Stephen and him last night, and I think he said he remembered me. A few people I would mention, yeah, I write some shit, right? Some of my poems were written in. We all would carry the battle book. It was like we called it as a green book. For some reason, the Army had a contract, right? Would buy all these like notebooks that had green hard covers on them, and called them the battle book or the green book, right? And that was basically your notebook, right? That's what you use as your notebook. Well, when you're in a tactical unit and you're carrying essentially what you use every day, and you have one notebook, you're writing one notebook. You know, if I'm going to write a letter, I'm going to rip a page out of the notebook and I'm going to write in my notebook and I'm going to send it in an envelope, right? That's all the paper I got, right? So I had stuff written in the margins where I was just writing.
Because you had written so much.
I wouldn't say so much. I'd written at many different times.
Okay.
And it would just be a few words, a few phrases. Sometimes it would be a full poem. And again, it would be a beat in my head. You know, when I'm writing this, probably because I had a Walkman on and I'm listening to some tunes, right? And so I would write stuff, and that's something I had done with my whole life, the way to process things, the way to deal with stuff. And, you know, I never intended on sharing it. I never intended on doing anything with it, really. So there was a lot of the stuff in my bedroom. My brother and I shared a bedroom when we grew up, and when my mother was cleaning out the bedroom, there was a lot of that stuff. Now, I moved out when I was 18. You know, when I went to college, I never really went back home for summers, but I never really lived back home again. My brother did, so he threw out most of the stuff in my bedroom. So there probably wasn't a whole lot that my mom was responsible for throwing away, but it wasn't like I ever wanted this stuff. Like I didn't know what am I going to do with it, right? Well, I had a trunk full of stuff from my last deployments in my garage that I moved from New Jersey to Texas. And, you know, I started going through that trunk and looking for stuff to see if I could find stuff that I wrote. I also wrote a book that I was going to publish as a children's book that was, it was an idea that I had that, you know, I care mostly about kids, like young people, not kids, but young people. Mm-hmm. And what can I give? So I wrote a book, but it wasn't well written and it wasn't going to go anywhere. I don't know what I would, but it was my way. Again, it was a novel, but it was an autobiography in a way. Like it was my stories, but with fictional characters, you know? And so I found all this stuff. And in that book, in one of the books, the character would write poems. So I took some of my poems. So I was able to find enough stuff from my last two deployments. I don't have anything from, I think the boxes she threw away was, you know, pre 9/11 essentially, or no, I have like from the mid 90s. So yeah, that's the long answer to your question is some boxes were thrown away and some boxes weren't. And some were just taken from my green books that I've had, which, you know, going through that stuff, by the way, guys out there, veterans out there, don't go into a Foot Locker that you haven't gone into for 20 years or 18 years, that you literally used as a dumping grounds for everything that you came off the plane with, because you will find stuff that will get you in a lot of trouble.
No, that's interesting. Now, I mean, I know you're laughing about it, but are you saying from a mental perspective?
Both. As a joke, like
okay,
classified information.
Oh, really? Okay.
You know, like it ain't to the level of the Joe Biden's garage or Donald Trump's, you know, beach house or whatever. I don't know, but you know, I had stuff that, you know, I don't know how I had it.
It's fascinating.
I had rounds. I had ammunition, and you know that was a big deal. That was a UCMJ offense if you got caught with taking rounds. You know, but again, one of my tours, I came home. My last tour, I came home on the FBI director's G5.
Oh,
yeah,
a G5.
A G5.
That's about a $10 million plane.
Oh my God,
maybe more.
I came home on that. That's how I came home, and my wife and kids were called and given an address to go to this airfield, and they were living in New Jersey. Oh gosh, my wife could tell the story better than me, but they were given an address to go meet me at the plane, and it was the Black Ops airfield outside of Dulles, you know, at the time it was classified. You know, it was a classified.
So that's Vegas, right? Las Vegas, Dulles Air Force. Where's that? No, that's in.
It's attached to Dulles Air Base.
Okay,
Air Force, Dulles Airport. It's a part of the runway. It's a secluded, fenced off area.
So we have something similar at Will Rogers. Basically, there's a military side of Will
Correct.
Rogers as well.
Correct.
Yeah,
Probably.
Okay, gotcha.
But this was 20 years. You know, this was 20 years ago.
Right.
Yeah. So the music, the songs became my way of, you know, starting to deal with some of this stuff. And then at some point, and even the songs I didn't write to share, I never thought I'd be sharing them.
So, and I've listened to some of them, and I'll tell you, they're pretty.
I hope people like them.
No,
they're not for everybody.
They're very Bob Dylan-ish.
Yeah.
I will say that. Yeah. I mean, they're very heartfelt. You can say that. Where do you think you got the words?
Well, they're from all those things that I wrote, and where they came from was just my heart at the time. And that's what I'm proud of. Like, I don't claim to be a good, you know, musical composition writer, even somebody worthy of listening to in that way. The songs are all stories, and that's what I believe these stories. You know, I've had enough people say to me that these stories were meaningful to them, and they finally felt like they had a voice. And so, and there's other guys who've done what I've done, guys and gals who've, you know, veterans who've come back and written songs, and there's people who are a lot more talented because they could sing and perform them too, right? But I can't do that, so I'm doing this, and that's kind of, I never really thought I would share it until enough people I was sharing it with just to, hey, what do you think of this? And then really for me, it was about the opportunity for sync. Somebody said to me, I have this online coach, if you will, for songwriting, and the opportunity to try and get these songs. There's all these independent film artists, independent screenwriters who are looking for music for
this is the age of the independents, man.
Correct.
Like, I'm telling you, it's there. Its opportunity is there.
Right. And so if you're writing,
you don't have to have a huge record label.
Correct. And if you're writing a movie or a documentary or a drama episode, a TV show, whatever you're writing that has elements of, you know, severe conflict, you know, elements of loss, element of gratitude, you know, a scene where somebody goes through something, a near-death experience, and then they're reflecting on it. Some of my songs are about that. If it's a scene of somebody actually going through it, you know, some of my songs are very much that first-person storytelling.
I'm going to pray something for you.
Okay. Well,
and I can't remember what his name is. It's Sheridan is his last name. Taylor Sheridan.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to pray that his movies, your song, watch what God does.
Well, that would be great, because there's a few of them that when I was putting them together, and I'm a big fan of a lot of his shows and a lot of other shows, right? I'm like, yeah, this would be perfect. And I didn't change the lyrics. Well, a few of them I did. Like, I did make some of them more like as I was being coached by this coach that I have online. You know, I started writing more that, because most of mine are very, very narrow and niche, right? You're only going to get it and appreciate it if you are experiencing something similar. And so some of the latter ones that I've been working on, that I've released on Spotify, I've kind of broadened the language a little bit to make it more generally appealing. So I have two. So the next one going on Spotify, I have 2 songs on Spotify. The third one that's going on Spotify is called Once You've Been There. And that's a song I'm kind of testing Spotify a little bit, because my other 2 songs are doing really well. It's surprisingly well, better than I thought they would do. So I'm really grateful to that. I mean, the fact that 5 people are listening to it amazes me. It's like, that's so cool. There's nothing cooler that somebody else finds some value in it. But Once You've Been There is a very, it's much more, it's about going to combat, and it's basically the song, how it changes you, and you're not the same afterwards, and you can't see things the same, and you can't explain it. And those words were written years ago.
You say that's more of a broad view, but maybe I would say just how you explain would be a narrow view, right? There's not very many people that's gone to combat. However, let me ask you this, because I've never listened to that song yet.
Right.
If I were abused by horribly as a child, and I was going through that combat, could I relate to it?
Yeah, for sure. No doubt about it. And it's just different. No 2 experiences are the same, right? And so, yeah, there's no doubt.
Now, you said one of the lyrics of the songs. Remind me of that earlier in the podcast. It says something. You know, lay down there's no way you can lay down all your fears or all your worries, or some lyric at the very end of one of the songs you mentioned earlier in the podcast.
I don't remember which one I was referring to. All that's left is the haze and fog and the memory of being there. Is that?
No, that wasn't it. It was something about that all your troubles can't go away, or you can't lay down all your troubles, something like that. It was. And if I could remember it, darn it, I should write it down. But it was very biblical to me.
Right.
And you mentioned that before we got on the podcast, that some people say, "Well, that's a biblical line."
The bonus time.
Yeah.
Right.
Remind me.
Right. I don't remember which line I referenced in bonus time, but there's a few that, you know, it's all the song bonus time is all about near surviving, and so it's, you know, the story. It starts out as, you know, telling the story of the first time I had a near-death experience, or a friend had one, and I remembered mine. And it goes back to, you know, that's one that I think I wrote. There's two different poems that I wrote, and that part of the poem was written in thinking about a bunch of, you know, several of us sitting around. I can remember where it was in Bagram, Afghanistan, and sitting around and kind of comparing notes on close calls, right? Like kind of the question you were asking me earlier, and then the other part of it is, you know, having a poem that was written about having watched a person die. When you said earlier, you know, when you've watched someone, you know, leave this earth, it's a very moving experience. And I wouldn't call it traumatic. I mean, it's traumatic, obviously, it varies based upon how close you are with that person, but it's moving as hell, because the thing I remember the most about that, and talking about it with guys who experienced it, is you're never going to forget that person. You know, that however many there are, you know what I'm saying? Like, you are remembered by the people who are around you when you die, and then the people who love you. That's it. That's all this world is at the end of it. And I think that is something that my words captured. You know, when I went back and read the two poems, I thought these two go together, and then I kind of put them to music.
Do you remember the last lyric in bonus time?
Oh gosh, I'm getting confused. Let's look it up.
Let's do.
I kind of.
This is worth it, because I could swear that this lyric is at the last.
No trophy, no crown. I remember, but let me just make sure. So I was trying to, you know.
Okay, yeah.
And then I have two on Spotify, the third one that's coming out.
Right.
And then, so for me, there's so many different songs, and sometimes I can't remember which ones yeah.
Okay.
My biggest problem was that some of them are saying the same story, my poems. So sorting them all out was like an exercise. I used a lot of AI for that. Just like, which of these are the similar stories?
Sure.
I mean, especially all my coming home, same story.
Yeah.
That's the sad part. And that's why I know.
Well, it's therapeutic.
Right. But it's also like, that's how I know everybody's feeling the same thing. We're all feeling the same thing.
Yeah.
It's.
Well, listen, don't worry about finding the song.
I
got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll read the lyrics, and you can tell me which one I said earlier, because I don't think I remember. It never really made sense, but it was real for all of us. Even bound by the strongest bonds, we never showed too much. The stakes were always too high. The spotlight never dimmed. Every move was measured, every breath held in. So we stood our watch in silence, each in our own lane, like actors playing our parts, trying not to forget the names. Conviction had to carry us with every eye in view. There was no safe place to soften, no room to come unglued. I might have said that. We stood alone among the heroes. So, this is the chorus. Side by side, but never free to lay our burdens down. We stood alone among the heroes, holding steady in the light while breaking without a sound. A slip at the wrong moment could cost more than the end. Worse than falling short was failing those who depend. So we swallowed what we carried, and we did what had to be done, even when the weight was crushing and the long night hadn't begun. Now those days are far behind us, the threat no longer near. The mission isn't urgent, the danger isn't here. But we move in quiet, even when we speak, surrounded by company, feeling out of reach. It was never us who were the heroes, even if we played our part. We just kept the watch with guarded minds and guarded hearts. I thought this was the one, but now I'm not seeing the line.
It is the one.
Okay, we stood alone.
You've already read it.
Okay, alone among the heroes, not above, not set apart. just holding the line. We stood alone among the heroes until the day we learned the silence never left behind.
So the line in there, it says that we can never lay our burdens down.
Right.
All right. So here's my challenge. Here's my question to you. So we discussed this, and I phrase it as you're non-messianic Jewish.
Right.
So here's my ask of you. You also said that we're not set apart.
Right.
In Jesus' eyes, we're set apart because we live out his great commission. He also says that you can lay your burdens at my feet and I will heal you. All you have to do is submit and be obedient to laying those down and trust me. Man, I can tell you right now that you haven't let go of a lot of things.
Yeah.
And you're trying.
Yeah. I think that's the human story, right?
I would just pray this one prayer for you, is that as you're writing these lyrics and they're coming out of you, just ask the God of the Torah, if you will, is your son giving me these? Just ask that question. Just ask that question. The last thing I would ask is, you've done amazing work and you're continuing. You're at halftime. Where do you think you go after you leave our weekend terrible bodies? Where do you go?
Yeah. That is the question, right? That is a question we're all searching for. And I wish I had the faith that some people have, that it is as glorious as people believe. And I think I've seen too much evil to believe that. I don't know. I that's a deep question. There's no atheists in foxholes is a true statement.
I was going to say that.
And
or ask that.
You definitely, like, the most religious I ever was when I was in combat, for sure. And I was in theater when I was going through this time. I have an aversion towards communal prayer, I guess. I don't, I get I wouldn't say turned off by it, but it just doesn't, it turns off my mechanisms to receive, I guess, in a way, which kind of made it difficult for me when I didn't have that my whole life. But Judaism has this thing, of course, it's not murder when you're a soldier and you're fighting, right? And Judaism allows for that. But there's also this, the biggest area that I've struggled with religiously is I'm quite certain that there are Jews out there. I'll just keep it to the religion and the people I know the most in terms of, in this way, in a religious way, who will say, I won't get that opportunity. I will not. I've committed a sin. I've murdered. I've killed. And the fact that it's not, according to rabbinical teachings, becomes a matter of politics, right? A matter of interpretation, a matter of on whose order and this and that. And when I start going down that rabbit hole, it's like, that's where I get, what is religion? That's like what we said earlier, right? But clearly that's the question you're asking, right? And then I think that's I don't claim to have the answer. I really don't. I'm open to it. I believe deeply that we have an obligation to live probably the same exact life that you are saying, according to whatever God I call Adonai, which is what God is to me. I believe that with all my heart, that we want the same, we are living by the same code, right? There's no difference between the two. I had enough experiences with, other people and other religions, overseas, you had to work right and left with Muslims, Nothing hurts me more when I hear people talk about how we hate Muslims or Jews hate Muslims or this or that. It's unbelievable. I think most people who are true, if you're a true godly, I don't, like to use that word either, but you all want the same thing at the end, right? And that's one of the things I think my experiences have taught me is that people all over the world, most people are good people, but they do sometimes do some bad things, I don't know. It's a humbling experience when you think about it from that perspective. And I think that's part of what you're saying too. I don't have the answers.
There was 2 scriptures that, because I was an atheist up until I was age 42. So I'm 10 years of chasing Jesus here.
Mm-hmm.
But 2 scriptures really, really shook me. One was Hebrews 8:12, which says, if you lay down if you repent to me, I will remember your sin no more. I couldn't believe, I didn't understand that. Like, what about this God that keeps like a checklist, keeps score on me, right?
Right.
He literally says, I will remember your sin no more. I couldn't believe that. All the things that I'd done, you're going to forget all that? I'm going to jump on this bandwagon and Jesus, you're going to take me and restore me? And Romans 8:1, there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Those shook my foundation a lot, my paradigm shift. Because once I received Christ and I had this mission to say, I want to go help the warfighters that allow me to practice whatever faith that I want and keep my borders safe, that resonated with me so much because of the things that you have to do on a battlefield in a split second. When you finally rest and those dreams start coming to your brain and your brain starts turning back on, and all of those memories start coming back into you going, did I have to shoot that person? Did I have to do this? Did I have to do that? The enemy says, I come to kill, steal, and destroy you. That's when he starts to do his best work on you. And he's working on you, but you're fighting through that, through music. All I ask is don't outsource this question to anybody, but just ask God, Adonai,
right. I don't know. Yeah.
Is your son giving me these lyrics? Just that one question.
Yeah. That's
brother, I love you. I thank you for everything you did for this country.
Thank you for doing this. This was meaningful.
You know what's impressive, Matt, is your lamp of gladness. That's a New Testament. Paul was talking about God giving you a lamp of gladness, joy, abundant joy. And unless you're faking it, which I don't think you are.
I am who I am. I think that's gotten me in more trouble than that's probably limited my career and my success just as it did that day when I said the wrong thing to a general. But I'm who I am. And that way I'm not really changing either. It's like I accept it. I talk about this in the chapter that I wrote for this leadership book that's coming out. I've been accused of being too genuine because I am who I am. And that's, and I know what that person meant is positive. Like in order to make the next level of leadership in a corporate executive environment, you've got to give up some of that genuineness. I think that's what happens in our world today. I think that's the biggest problem.
You become inauthentic, you mean? You become...
Well, you become just a soundbite. You become somebody who's just speaking. Great communicators many people believe that if you're a great communicator, you're great in every way.
I'm going to tell you something right now. Your music's about to bust out. And I'm just telling you this because literally what you're saying right now is you're not going by it. You're being authentic to who you are.
100%.
And most people aren't.
That's why I'm here. And that's why I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Right. That's what I'm trying to do. I don't know what that is. I still don't. I'm filling the void with songs, but
you want to speak Romans 10:9 real quick?
Go ahead. I love learning, man. I love it.
All it is, it's so simple. If you believe that God walked this earth and he died for our sins, rose in 3 days, and you want to serve him the rest of your life, watch what happens when you say that in your heart.
Hmm.
Watch what happens the next 50 years of your life.
Hey, can we close on something? Since
Sure, go right ahead, man.
I have a friend.
Okay.
One of my oldest friends, a veteran friend, combat veteran, who is going through an ordeal right now, right? For all the things we've talked about. But he's one of my oldest friends in my life. He's a brother. And I know you like to pray. And he is not Jewish. So
I love the Jewish people, by the way. Dearly.
I think that is.
I love all people. Really.
Yeah. No, and look, there's an affinity between Christians and Jews that I think it's unbreakable, right? I mean, it's we're of the same.
We can't have one without the other.
Correct. And so there's a respect there and an appreciation that I think most Jews also have. But I can't speak for anybody else. But my friend is going through this tough time. And he is somebody who would say that in the latter parts of his life recently, last couple of years, I don't know if you say that he's had an awakening or has how he would term it, but he's definitely become much more religious. And he's actually supporting a school, and I don't want to get too much into personals because this is his story. He's going through a tough time right now. So if you can say a prayer for him, since
what type of school is it?
He has helped build a school in an African country for kids who have nothing. Like he went over there last year or so, and I mean we're talking like he built a school.
Is it with a organization?
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
I feel now.
Is it Favor International by chance? Is it in Uganda? Is it Chad? Do you remember what country?
I have memory issues.
This is wild.
Like, I know this.
You're asking this question.
My brain is sitting over on the table here.
That's the ancillary brain.
That's where I know the answer because my brain is, when it comes to memory stuff, I have my issues.
I have a specific prayer for him. I don't know, but here's what I'm going to pray.
Okay.
And Father God, I pray that Matt's friend finds, if he's not with the organization, Lord, that he finds the organization that you will bring to him, that will restore him, will flank him and as a military and support him, Lord. But when that happens, he sees that he needed another Christian, he needed another reinforcement that you brought to him. This is going to reinforce his testimony, Lord, that he does not go towards the darkness, that he goes towards the light, that what he's doing is for you, to glorify your Son. Lord, I pray that you just impress this on him, that even today as we're speaking, Lord, that something he sees, says, hears, just speak to him today, that you are there, you're not leaving him, that's not what you do, and you will remain with him, Lord, just through the tough times, the good times, you're there, Lord. This is to refine him to be a better soldier for your army. Lord, just be with him. I pray over him, the blood of your Son, and help him find that organization he needs to give him that boost, whoever that is. Lord, it's in your name I pray over him.
Amen. Thank you, man.
Favor International.
I'll try and find it.
That's who was on our podcast 2 guests ago.
You're kidding me.
The daughter, she's in Uganda right now. Do you remember the name Joseph Kony? Joseph Kony was a warlord of 20 years in northern